In this video, we will discuss Scrum Artifacts. An artifact is something that is created by those using Scrum framework. An artifact in Scrum represents work or value and provides opportunities for transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The Scrum Guide defines 3 artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and an increment, also known as product increment. So let us now look at each of them in detail. The product backlog is an ordered list of everything that is known to be needed in the product. It is a list of requirements which can be new features or improvements, fixes, or any other changes that need to be done on a product. The items at the top of the list are more important and are also described in more detail. As long as the product exists, the product backlog exists. It is never complete and it is constantly changing, for example, due to changing business requirements or market conditions. So, who is responsible for the product backlog? In Scrum, the product owner is solely responsible for the content and the order of the product backlog. And this is the person whose job is to maximize the value. The Scrum Guide does not give any guidelines as to how items should be formulated. Yet product backlog items have a few attributes such as description, order, estimate, value, and test description. A common way to describe the item are user stories or simply stories. These are short descriptions of a feature explained from the perspective of the person who desires this new feature. It has a simple template. As a kind of user, I want to achieve something so that, and then comes the reason. Let us look at an example. Let's say we are creating a homepage for a law firm. A possible user story could be: as a customer interested in the Rocket Law, I want to open a browser and view some basic information about the company so that I can make contact in case I have some questions. Each item will have a specific order in the product backlog list, a specific estimate and a specific value. An estimate is the best guess of the effort necessary to carry out a given task. It is still just the best guess. It's not really a commitment, so there is always some uncertainty. A typical tool to make estimates in Scrum is planning poker. Each item in the product backlog should also have value points. It could be on a scale from 100 to 1000 or any other scale you prefer. And this will be also just a guess, not a measurement. So the value shows what is the value of something, why are we doing this? Finally, the test description makes it clear how the team can assess whether the item is done. In our law firm homepage case, a possible test description could be: I should see the logo of Smart Law, I should see the postal address, email address, and the phone number. So, how exactly is the product backlog created and managed? The product owner will usually try to understand the customer and other stakeholder requirements. Then the product owner will add features or ideas to the product backlog, and in the product backlog refinement meeting together with the development team, the product owner will work on refining details and estimates. This is an ongoing process throughout the sprint, but it should not occupy more than 10% of the capacity of the development team. Product backlog refinement is not an official event, so you will not see it in the Scrum framework in the visualizations that you might find online. While the product owner is responsible for the product backlog, the development team is responsible for all estimates, and the development team has the final say on that. It is in their competence to assess how much time they need to get something done. The product backlog items that can be done in the next sprint are deemed as ready for selection by the development team. This usually means that not only the items are small enough to fit within a sprint, but they are also detailed enough and immediately actionable. There are several tools that allow to manage product backlog. It can be a document on a whiteboard in a commonly shared room. Alternatively, the team can also use software tools like Jira or Trello. The sprint backlog is a set of product backlog items selected for the sprint. plus a plan for delivering the product increment. It is the development team's forecast about what functionality the next product increment will have. A sprint backlog will also consist at least of one process improvement from the last sprint retrospective meeting. This artifact lives as long as the sprint lives. If new work is required, the development team adds it to the sprint backlog. When something is unnecessary to create the product increment, it is removed. This artifact also helps to ensure the transparency in the Scrum process. So who is responsible for the sprint backlog? While product backlog is the responsibility of the product owner, the development team bears the responsibility for the sprint backlog. The last artifact in the Scrum framework is the increment. It is the sum of all items completed in the sprint and the value of all increments from all previous sprints. Each new increment is an improved version of product. The product increment needs to be in usable condition without additional work to release it. That means that it is tested and integrated before the release, and this is something that should be accomplished during the sprints. By the end of the sprint increment, it has to be done. In order to know when the increment is done, the development team has to create the definition of done. It describes conditions or quality criteria that the product has to meet when the work is completed. This definition of done does not change during the sprint, even if the team runs out of time. With experience, it will become more comprehensive and have higher standards.